Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rafael, and today I'm going to be presenting my project for ENC 1102, which is the Great Recession. So let's get started. So before I start talking about the Great Recession, I wanted to give you a bit of background on it. So the Great Recession happened from 2007 to 2009, but end of 2007, around December of 2007. So I want to talk about 2003 to 2007, what was happening to the economy, GDP, unemployment rate, and national debt. As you can probably see, the economy was steadily increasing, not too much, but a bit. The GDP was increasing by 2.8% a year on average, and the unemployment rate was about 5.16%, and national debt was around $9 trillion. 5.16% for the unemployment rate would be the all-time high, according to the Bureau of Government Agency. During 2003 to 2007, a lot of our favorite apps were built, such as Facebook, YouTube, and of course, the iPhone, the first of many. That's what was going on in 2003 to 2007. So technology wasn't that developed yet. It was starting to get developed, but it was just the beginning of what we now know today. Okay, so what were people doing? Back in 2007 and before that, from 2003 to 2007, people were buying a lot of houses, and not everyone could afford those houses. And that's probably what led to the burst of the housing bubble. So people had this conception that this housing market was always going to increase, and it was a robust investment, safe, risk-free. And unfortunately, after a couple of years from 2007, it decreased and burst. And it was not known to be such a safe investment. So what were investment banks and government agencies doing? Well, since everyone thought the housing market was always going to increase and that it was a great investment banks such as the Lehman Brothers and other investment banks, as well as government agencies, decided to buy up a load of mortgages so that they could rent it out to other people and get an interest from them of a certain percentage. Okay. So there are two types of mortgages. There's the regular mortgages and there's the subprime mortgages. Regular mortgages, it's for people with somewhat of a high credit score. I'll say upper middle class or even middle class. And the subprime mortgages were mostly for low income individuals with low credit score. But at this time, literally everyone could get approved for the subprime mortgages. But the problem with subprime mortgages was this. You take on a mortgage and you pay back the bank certain interest every year. And at the end of the first year, there was written on the fine print that the interest rates were gonna triple from what it originally was. So like for example, for the first year, some low credit score individuals who wanted to buy a house were probably offered 3% interest rate, 3 to 5. That's reasonable, right? For low credit score. And since they don't read the fine print, they will see that it's adjustable over time, meaning that the next year they wouldn't be able to afford it as the interest rate of that subprime mortgage had become 10%, 20%. Like the interest rates at the time were outrageous. And that was what led to the housing bubble burst. Yeah, so when offered a contract that seemed too good to be true, make sure you read the fine print, CDOs, and the rating agency. So CDOs are credit debt obligations. They're like a basket, right? A basket full of mortgages. The problem with CDOs is those mortgages are like very unsafe mortgages, like subprime mortgages, right? And in this case, the banks would put all the mortgages that they couldn't sell into CDOs. CDOs are baskets of mortgages that have transformed into subprime mortgages, which those mortgages initially had not been sold at the time by the bank. And the rating agency gives it a high safety rating, for example, of AAA, which was really good at the time. And people believe in it, that the rating is normal and safe, and that the interest rate won't be too high since the investment is considered to be safe. But the problem is the investment wasn't safe and it was full of crap, actually, since the first year it was considered safe. But now, a few years later on, the interest rate, since it was adjustable, will always increase, which is why the housing the Great Recession happened later on, but people were doing that from like 2003 to 2007. All right, so CDOs, big waste of time, is just a basket full of subprime mortgages that people were willing to buy if they needed a house, and it is definitely not worth it, as people found out later on. Complex derivative investments. So everyone was trying to make money, right? The insurance, everyone was trying to make money, people in general, everyone was trying to make money off of this housing market. So they invented a concept that was called synthetic CDOs, which is basically betting if a customer is gonna keep paying for his subprime mortgages. It's basically betting on whether someone is gonna pay their mortgage or not, which is quite amusing if you ask me. We get to the fall of the housing market. People are not able to pay their subprime mortgages, mostly their interest rates. So the housing market is high supply, low demand, meaning that the prices of the houses fall since everyone's going out of the housing market, since they're now able to pay their mortgage because of the crazy interest rates. So I want to talk about what the upper class, middle class, and lower class had to do during the Great Recession. Well, let me just start off by saying one thing. A lot of people were negatively infected by the Great Recession, and a few people were positively affected by the Great Recession. A lot of rich people had to sell off their mortgages, their homes, and ended up on the street basically because of the investments they had made that had not gone well due to the housing crisis and the financial crisis of 2008. Some people researched the topic of housing market before it fell and betted against it, which led them to become rich from it. But the problem with the 2008 recession was the banks allowing everyone to buy houses, even the people who didn't have the money for it and the low credit score. Everyone was just greedy in this period of time. And a lot of people lost their jobs and a lot of people became homeless. It was a tough period to live in. So, what did people do with their assets? So, an asset is something that's making you money. And what happened was a lot of people that still had investments decided to sell their investments in the stock market and put it in treasury bonds. And treasury bonds work like this, right? I go up to the government and I tell them, here, I'll give you $10,000, but you give me back some interest, just like a bank, right? And they'll be like, okay, because they're very short on cash. So we give them $10,000 and they give us back a certain percentage of interest every year, which is like a phenomenal investment at that point, since everything was decreasing. Stock market was decreasing, housing market, bonds in general were also decreasing. So lending money to the government was the best way to go to make sure we get a small percentage. It wasn't as big as selling houses and flipping them. It's a safe investment, basically. It's a guaranteed percentage increase. But you can't use that money. That's the only problem, since you're giving it away to the government. And they have a certain amount of time to pay you back. Yeah, so that's how treasury bonds work. During 2008, we experienced the largest US bankruptcy, where one of the biggest investment banks in the United States declared bankruptcy and had around $600 billion in assets, in housing assets mostly, which was not too good for the economy and led a lot of people to become homeless. They had a lot of employees and everyone was laid off basically because people are greedy. Okay, the aftermath of the US economy. The stock market after the beginning of 2009 was around negative 54%. The Great Recession had strongly impacted it. The housing market on average decreased by 30%, in terms of like housing prices. So you could buy pretty good houses for low amount of money. I wish I had made that investment back then because houses were like pennies on the dollar compared to nowadays. So, yeah, but hey, I was only three, so it doesn't matter. And the unemployment rate hit an all-time high of 10%. That means 1 in 10 person were laid off or were like not employed. And that doesn't even include all the people that are allowed to work, since unemployment rate only works with people that are looking for a job or people that are transitioning from one job to another. So there were a lot more people that were unemployed and gave up looking. So 10% of the labor force is quite high, but I can guarantee you it was much bigger than that. GDP was decreasing by a total of 4.3% for approximately 3 years from 2007, 2008, and 2009. During those years, GDP was decreasing by 4.3%, and the national debt was about $12 trillion. So if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, the national debt was 9 trillion and it increased to 12 trillion, which is 3 trillion in about 2 years, basically. Quite insane to think about. Impact on world economy. America is known to be a big nation in terms of trade. It has a huge impact on the global economy, mostly Europe and South American countries. So yeah, they had to increase security afterwards in international trading, like make sure the exports were good, the imports were good. And as you can see, here's what's on there. Okay, reflections from the USA. Basically, added securities. So in 2010, Obama signed the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, which increased securities among banks and rating agencies, as well as insurance companies, to make sure that a recession like 2008 will never happen again. Since, as I might have told you earlier, the banks were lending out mortgages to anyone. even people with low credit score. So a lot of people couldn't afford those houses and they were approved, which is not good, I guess, and led a lot of people to become homeless. So added securities was important at the time. Never let greed outshine. Never let greed outshine common sense. So, which the banks learned in the hard way. But yeah, and yeah, that's what that was. Okay, so my survey, I did a Google form. I posted it on a few group chats of personal finance to get some good answers. And here are the questions I asked. I asked the informed consent, of course. How good is your personal financial literacy and how informed are you on the topic of the Great Recession to establish credibility in our survey's participant? And here are the three questions I actually asked for people to plug their opinions in. So, how could someone have come out on top of the Great Recession? What can we learn from the Great Recession at an individual level? And are we in a recession? If yes, how does this recession compare and contrast to the Great Recession? I wanted to know if in 2023 we were in a recession, because a lot of people are debating that we are, and a lot of people are debating that we are not. So I wanted to do a bit of research to find out. Here are my responses on my two credibility questions. Most of them were moderately informed. Okay, so here are the responses to my first question. How could someone have come out on top of the Great Recession? Each bullet point is one answer. I'll let you read the rest. Okay, my second question was quite similar to my first question. What can we learn from the Great Recession at an individual level? Here are some of the answers. I'll let you read it for yourself. And I believe every answer was very interesting and gives a lot of opportunities for someone who knows nothing about personal finance to increase their finance literacy. And it's useful information. Although we don't have the same recession and will never be in the same economical climate since every situation is different, but it's useful when we see trends in the economy. Part four, are we in a recession? If so, how does this recession compare and contrast to the Great Recession? A lot of people say yes, but a lot of people said that it doesn't compare to '08 and '09. I only had about three participants that said no, so the rest said yes. I'll let you read it. Here's my textual analysis. I analyzed Big Short, which is a movie about the Great Recession. And it talks about people betting against the housing market before 2008. And it's incredibly dramatic. And at the time, they were losing faith. And at some point, the housing market bubble burst and they made tons of money from their rational decision. That was not expected. Everyone was betting for the housing market to increase, and they were the first to bet against and made tons of money from it. And I analyzed it in a socio-economic manner. You can read it if you want. Here are my sources. Thank you for your time, and I hope this wasn't too long.